and welcome again. This is part 3 of our Prevention to Prosecution, Exploring the Many Faces of Fraud, Scams, and Exploitation series. I need to come up with shorter titles. Anyway, I know some of you are familiar faces and some not. There were a couple of people may still come on in. Again, this is going to be real relaxed, so feel free to get up and get some more water or some snacks, whatever. I did leave an evaluation form again by everybody's desk, so that again will help me to know going forward. Location, time of day, is there anything that would work out better for you, or future topics that would be of interest, because I always want to bring things that are relevant to what people are experiencing or what they need information about, whether it's something I can deliver or whether it's something I want to bring in experts like this. So please leave that for me to look at. Again, my name is Christine. I'm the Lifelines Program Director here at Friends for Life. Lifelines is actually a new program. We started that in November of last year. And so I offer care consultations and care coordination and management, lots and lots of information and referral, education, whether it's something I'm presenting or whether it's something I'm bringing in experts, and things of that nature. Beginning to integrate some scam, fraud, and exploitation services within my role so that I can also help people navigate those things, hopefully prevent them, right, and from encountering them. But if you do, determine what it is and then what possibly, if anything, could happen with that in terms of correcting or keeping it from happening again, things like that. Has anybody in this room not received some type of fraudulent or scammers, text or email or phone call or piece of mail in the mail? I mean, it's everywhere, and there's so many different facets of it, and that's why I came up with the title and the 7 different programs, because there's so many different pieces to it. I hope this is beneficial to you. I think it will be. Please share with other people so that they're aware of it. Isolation and loneliness are 2 things that a lot of either elderly or sometimes persons with IDD, right, some type of intellectual or developmental disability, things like IDD and autism and things like that, they experience that sometimes a lot more than the rest of us do, a lot more prone to isolation and loneliness. Well, isolation and loneliness also increases people's risk for scam, fraud, and exploitation. And so when we think about the fact that everybody in this room already said, right, I have received some type of communication from somebody who is a scammer or a fraudster or whatever, we think how much more easier, I guess, persons with some type of an intellectual or developmental disease or dementia, or somebody who's maybe a little bit on up there in years, maybe can't process quickly, how much more easily they can fall victim, right? And these folks know that, and so they will target them in particular. But we're all at risk, right, for so many different reasons. In fact, the National Center on Elder Abuse has said that, let me read it, isolation and loneliness are well-established predictors of maltreatment and risk factors for fraud, scam, and exploitation, different forms of abuse like that. So all of the 7 different programs that Friends for Life has to offer do combat isolation and loneliness in some way or another. And so I do have some brochures over there about Friends for Life in general and the 7 different programs that I have. And of course, there's a lot of other benefits too, and there's a lot of other side effects, and repercussions from loneliness and isolation besides this. But this is something that we are seeing more and more of. Today we're here to talk about protecting your assets, right? Partnering to protect your assets, yourself and your assets. And oh, wait, did everybody register for door prize? Yes? Okay, so Casey's not here, but we still are going to do that. I would typically introduce Casey and let her say something about Right at Home, but I'm going to do that in her stead. Right at Home is a home care service here in Waco. If you're not familiar, we have several different agencies. Right at Home is one of our agencies that provides quality service, really tries to do a good job of hiring caregivers who can help anybody who might be caretaking for a loved one, or if somebody is living at home alone, or even in a facility and they need a little extra for whatever reason. They also do actually serve some folks that are not even adults, that maybe have an IDD diagnosis, right? And they might be teenagers or a younger adult with IDD and not a senior. So the services aren't that limited, but it's all those different kinds of companionship and home helper things and all those kinds of things. So really great service, and she reached out and said, hey, I'd love to supply a door prize and a snack for your classes. So thank you to Casey if you see her. Thank you to Right at Home if you see anybody from that. Thank you to MCC for letting us have the classes here free of charge. So now I want to introduce to you Brad Neimer, right?
Neimer.
Yeah, I thought I was right. He's the Executive Vice President for American Bank. We were just reminiscing a little bit because we both graduated from Midway High School. I'm just a little bit older, but we're not going to talk about how much. So Brad, though, has about 25 years in banking experience. He was with Chase Bank for about 13 years, and then American Bank now for about 13 years. And I remember seeing it said something about public fund clients, and I don't even know what that means.
Cities and counties and municipalities.
Oh, I was gonna say, I don't even know what that is. You're gonna have to tell me.
No, I've done a lot of work with cities, and particularly in my days at Chase and now, so I handle an American Bank, most of our public entities, things like school districts and cities and things of that nature as well. So,
okay.
And a lot of non-for-profits over the years. So I've worked with a lot of private schools and different organizations that have not-for-profit work.
And as a nonprofit, Friends for Life is a nonprofit, American Bank is one of the two banks that we use for some of our programs, like our money management and guardianship of the state programs, and love working with them and trust them, which is one of the reasons why I reached out to American Bank about having somebody come and talk about banking, scam and fraud and exploitation. So without any further ado,
Okay.
I'm going to hand it over to Brian.
Everyone good that I'm sitting instead of standing, because it's easier to read the notes as opposed to walking around, and I really hate standing behind. I much prefer when I'm in a bigger crowd to. I most times don't need a microphone on me, so I like to roam around the crowd. This crowd's a little bit smaller than most of the ones. I was telling her earlier that I've done everything from kindergartners to junior high, and this is a lot better group because number one, the last time I was doing some career stuff about banking at La Vega Elementary, it was the day before the Christmas break, and I got to follow the dog trainers who had dogs with them. So they're talking dogs and getting to pet the dogs, and I'm talking banking. So just didn't work out very well. So I appreciate the opportunity to come and visit. I tend to make this kind of an interactive session. I probably won't go a whole lot. I'll flip through some of the notes, but I don't intend to go through a lot of those. It's going to be more talking about some of the things that transpire and what we're seeing today in the banking industry and the risks that are out there. For those that you don't know, as you mentioned, my name is Brad Neimer. I am a native of Waco. Let me talk first a little bit about American Bank. It was established in 1952 as the Belmead State Bank. In 1979, the bank moved into the round building. I'm sure everyone's familiar with the round building. Of course, we tore that round building down. For those who, we didn't get a whole lot of complaints from the community. Most of it came from people who were driving by going, how could you tear down the icon? My response was, if you weren't inside the building, you didn't know what it was like. Because the inside of the building, it had some challenges to it. I'll just leave it at that. In 1982, a group of business people started American National Bank over in Woodway, and in 1986, the American Plaza building over by the mall was opened at that time. In 1987, the two banks merged. In 2013, we opened our branch downtown. So today we have what amounts to really 4 branches. We have the one in Belmead, which we still pay homage to the round building. If you ever come by or see it, the front of the building is intentionally round to look like the round building. Then we have our downtown location, and we have the one on Woodway on Highway 84, and then we have the location inside the American Plaza building. Just a little bit of background on us. We're a family-owned business. The ownership's here in Waco. It's a small group. Our mission is to be the best community bank in the market. Our core values are, sorry, this thing's recording me. Core values are integrity, respect, teamwork, customer focus, community, and having fun. So we've been around for a long period of time. We don't have any branches outside of Waco. We're solely in McLennan County. We're one of the few. If you go around most parts of the state, there are very few banks that are only in one community. Most have spread to multiple communities, but our bank and our ownership has stayed true to that. So a little bit about me. As she mentioned, I'm the executive vice president and the senior lender at the Belmead branch. My family moved here in 1973, so I was not born in Waco, but as my wife likes to say, I got here as fast as I can. I was all the age of 1 when my parents, my father was the original purchasing manager at M&M Mars, so my family moved here in 73, and I still have pictures where the plant was being built at that time, and it looks a lot different today than what it did back then. And so I went to Midway schools. I graduated from Midway in 1990. My wife and I actually, a quick funny story, my wife and I actually met in high school. She was a year younger than me. Her dad worked for Mars as well. He was an engineer. So the good news is I made a good impression with her mom. She was my vacation Bible school teacher. Went to First Baptist. I grew up going to First Presbyterian Church, but I lived in Hewitt, where my parents still live today, and so I'd go to vacation Bible school up at First Baptist Church at Hewitt, and my 3rd grade year, I was in her vacation Bible school class, and she went home, and she would sit here and tell this story, so I'm not telling any tall tales here, that she goes, I met the nicest little boy in that room, his name's Brad Neimer. And my father-in-law said, well, I work with his dad. So the good news is, when I asked my wife out in high school, wasn't a problem there, so I'd already made a good impression. So my wife and I have been married 29 years. We'll celebrate our 30th anniversary next year, and been together 35 years. We have 2 kids. We have a 25-year-old daughter who lives in Dallas and works for the Arlington Convention and Visitors Bureau. So if you're on social media, I always put a plug in for it. Go to Visit Arlington and you'll see the work she gets to do. So very proud. She mentioned about autism and things of that nature. So I have a 21-year-old son who lives at home, who's under the autism spectrum. He probably, in all likelihood, will live with us most of his life. I've learned not to make any assumptions on anything anymore. And so we are very fortunate to be able to do that. And so that got me passionate. Both our kids are through adoption. So we were very passionate about adoption, and we were embraced, and we're on the board of Generations Adoptions. And then, you know, it's funny where you're led on things. Our son had some major struggles. And so now I'm more involved in the mental health aspect. I work with several different not-for-profits, including the Behavioral Health Network and their foundation, the ARC, and others. So I'm very passionate about mental health and getting good mental health to our youth in the community. And my wife teaches music to a ABA therapy group here in Waco as well. So it's funny where God leads you on things. One thing you're thinking you're gonna have 2.5 children, a white picket fence, and my wife's gonna be a kindergarten teacher. Next thing you know, you're working with mental health disabilities. So it's very timely, because some of the things that she mentioned here are some of the things we're dealing with in my family. As my wife likes to call, we're kind of in a sandwich generation. So I still have to take care of my kids. We had a lot of battles with our son for years, and unfortunately right now we're dealing with some things with my parents, where my dad's Dementia's getting progressively worse. In fact, I'm gonna be taken in for an MRI tomorrow. My mom had back surgery a year ago, and she unfortunately doesn't handle things terribly well. And then I've got a nephew who's moved back from New York because he was having mental health, and we had to help hospitalize him. So where I'm going with all that, I see the issues, particularly when it comes to elderly with the fraud. You know, I've had to take over paying my parents' bills and things of that nature because my dad just forgets. And so they become more susceptible to it, and he's become more susceptible to it. And he answers every phone call that comes into the house. And so my mom unfortunately doesn't handle it well. She yells at him, tells him not to do it. And I'm like, don't yell, that's not helping the situation. But so I have to get to pay attention to make sure they're not getting fraud. As mentioned, I started my career 30 years ago at the age of 3, so I'm only 33 today. This crowd gets out a lot better than the junior high kids get, because I tell you, the junior high kids look at me like, no, you're old. So I started my banking career in '94 with Texas National Bank. Was there 2 years, and my wife and I had always grown up here, and we wanted to live somewhere else, so we moved to Dallas. Was with Nations Bank and Bank of America, and then had the opportunity to come back in 2000. Was there until 2004, when I was with Chase from 2004 to 17, and I've been with American Bank ever since, and been an EVP for the last 6 years. So that's a little background on me. As I mentioned, I intend to make this a very interactive. So I think our marketing part did a great job of putting all the pictures of all of our branches. So you can see all of our different branches over here. Gone through that. So talk a little bit about bank fraud. I'm going to start with there, and then I'm going to go into the different aspects of what we see on a daily basis. Just to kind of jump out there, so this is kind of timely as well. I've had people ask me, but you may have heard, may not have heard, we had an incident yesterday up in Belmead. Just to give you an idea of the things that we in the banking world deal with on a daily basis. Unfortunately, we had a situation where some of our employees were going to load what we call an ITM. It's like an ATM, but has a little more technology to it. They were out with the security guard when somebody pulled up in our parking lot in an unmarked vehicle. They had apparently been casing the place for a while and figured out timings. Fortunately, we had a very on top of it teller who was in the drive-through and saw what was happening, screamed multiple times, and the people who got out were crouching behind cars, jumped back in the car and took off. So, yeah, it was a frightening situation yesterday. And fortunately, I think they were just trying to do a quick hit and go, and my guess is they probably had a stolen car and things of that nature. But so we see things like that. It's not as common today. I'm going to talk a little bit about the most common things. One of them right now is check fraud, and I'll get into depth on check fraud and how bad it has been. I'm going to go a little bit. I left you a presentation to take with you. I'm sorry it didn't print out quite the way I'd like to come out. I'm going to kind of jump into this and hit first with identity theft. This is probably something you hear quite a bit about. I'm going to jump around in this presentation and just open it up to questions throughout. So have any of y'all ever had an instance of identity fraud? Never? You've had that?
I guess I actually did, because 1 year, and it was before we were hearing so much about scam and fraud, really, but had gotten something. I'd been filing my income tax, myself. And got something, it would not let me send it electronically. And it said I had to, contact the IRS because somebody had tried to steal my identity. And so the IRS actually got wind of it and made sure I was who I said I was, and then would not allow me to actually file my income tax. So thank God nothing happened with it, but apparently someone tried.
Actually, we've seen, that's become a bigger and bigger common fraud threat is fraudsters are getting enough information like social security numbers, date of birth, things of that nature, and unfortunately they can get it off the dark web, and they're filing false tax returns in your name. And their whole goal is to get a tax refund. So we'll talk a little bit about some ways and some steps that you can help prevent that and look at some different ways. Part of the problem we see today is that fraud there's benefits to increased technology, there's also negatives to increased technology. The benefits are obviously quicker answers, easier things to do, more timely in the way to get things done. And honestly, there are better security things that can now go along with technology. So an example, we just installed some new computers in our office. It is a bit of a pain, so I always have to make sure I have my phone on me. So every time I log into my computer now, I get a notification on my phone that I have to approve that I have logged on to my computer. So hopefully I never leave my phone at home, or I'm gonna have a tough time logging on to my computer. But what we've seen over the years is what banks have to be vigilant about, and what we share a lot with our employees and we go through a lot of training, is phishing. Phishing is one of the biggest things that making phone calls to garner little pieces of information. And it's little things to bits and pieces. And the more we put ourselves out there, whether it's on social media, whether it's on the internet, the fraudsters are looking at those things. They're looking at bits and pieces they can get to see perhaps where you live. A lot of them will disguise themselves as someone maybe from the IRS, somebody maybe from the bank. And this is one thing we always share with our customers. Banks will never call you and ask you for your account number, your social security number, your date of birth. We have that information. Now, there are rare instances where maybe we've gone through a system conversion or something of that nature, where potentially we need to update our systems. In that case, a lot of times we'll ask you to come in so that we can verify your identity. We're not going to ask you over the phone. As you see, what's happened too with AI, the fraudsters are able to replicate voices. And in some cases we've seen it, and it is very, very realistic. So they might call an internal employee, this is your CEO, I need you to release, $3,000, and the employee thinking that it is, and everything's with an urgency. So they're gonna look for little caveats to be able to get to build enough a case to replicate your stuff. So one of the things I always tell people is, one, be vigilant. When you're talking to somebody on the phone, I think we've all gotten this phone call. I've gotten a phone call on my cell phone. This is the IRS, you owe money. And if you don't call it, we're gonna begin prosecuting. Now, I know that's fraud, but even when you have that voicemail, that sense of urgency, it immediately creates that, oh, well, I know I filed my tax return last year. No, I'm not paid, it's fine, I know, that check cleared. But it creates it, and that's what they wanna do. They wanna create a panic so that you will panic and then immediately call them back. They'll also utilize data breach. So one of the things that most organizations are having to fight today is making sure that their data does not get breached. And that's becoming a harder and harder thing to do because the fraudsters have become really sophisticated. You've probably heard there was a pipeline company a couple of years ago that was well known that, and we'll talk about this one, that ended up with a blackmail situation or hijacking situation where it was one employee clicked on an email, and I think it was a pipeline company over on the East Coast. It opened up a virus within their system. They hijacked the entire company's data system and said that they would have to pay, I can't remember, several $1 million in order for them to release it, or they were going to delete everything that was in the system. So data breaches are a really big thing, and banks in particular were monitored on this. It's part of our exam. Are we doing what's necessary to protect data? Unfortunately, like any other organization, your weakest link is your people. And so we've made changes. So like on our emails, people are now replicating emails. I'll give you an example of this. My wife, I got an email the other day to my personal email that said it was for my wife. I look at it, I was like, and it said, look at these pictures I'm sending you. I was like, yeah, my wife would text me pictures. She's not gonna email me stuff. And you go up and all you can do is just scroll over the little header and you can see if it's a legitimate email. So like, if you have a mouse, or even if you touch it just to see what it is, you can see if it's a legitimate email. It was somebody who was masking my wife's email so that I would click on it and then turn around and I'd end up with a virus on my phone or my computer. So identity theft, you know, things we always talk about, you know, be very hesitant to give out your social security number. Big thing, and this is a big thing I tell my customers all the time. I have a system where I have to get updated financial statements from them, tax returns. We have a link on our emails that my clients can click on and upload into the system. I always tell them, please click and upload that. Don't email me a tax return, because once you've emailed it, it's out there. Unfortunately, not all my clients listen to me, and they just email me all sorts of fun stuff. I'm like, stop emailing me things. But they want to be able to replicate those things. A good identity theft, and I'll give you an example of what we had happen at the bank, and this was about 6 months ago. A customer of the bank had been phished, and they gave out just enough information that the person who was phishing it could create a passport card. So, you know, there's the passport books and there's the passport cards. This person created a passport card, came into the bank with that information, looking to do to cash a check. The check was in the name of a customer. They had an ID that looked like the customer and was a passport card. It's a good transaction to us, and unfortunately, we took a couple $1,000 loss on that because they had replicated a passport card and it looked just like the real thing. That's an unusual ID. Most people don't carry around a passport card, but it's also a legitimate ID. So hold on to those things. Credit card fraud. This is one, I tell people all the time, credit card companies are doing a much better job these days on catching fraudulent transactions. It used to be that if you traveled, you had to leave, and it's section 6 of that if you're flipping through it. Most credit card companies, you had to set an identifier before you traveled on that. A lot of them have done a really, really good job now of having a system that can catch unusual transactions. Always sign up for the alerts with credit cards. I can't recommend that enough. Most credit card companies will have automated notifications. Go in and consistently check, make sure your cell phone number is correct on there, your email address is on there, and go through on your online banking with your credit card companies and make sure they have the latest information. So if you could change your cell phone or something of that nature, make sure you update that in the system. Because when you travel, they're gonna, if there's a potential fraud alert, they're gonna text you, or they're gonna make a call and ask you if a transaction is good or not. If you don't respond, they're gonna assume it was a fraudulent transaction. They're gonna cut off the card right then and there. And if you're in the middle of London or traveling somewhere else, you're gonna have to make some phone calls to get this card reactivated. In the US, there were 440,000 reports of credit card fraud, which makes about 13% increase over the previous year.
But, and I may have mentioned this in one of the other classes, and correct me if I'm wrong, Brad, but when you just quoted that 440,000 reports, that's what was reported.
Correct.
So
That's
there's
correct.
more than that, which is an astonishing number in itself, but that's just what we know of.
So important things in the credit card companies. Unfortunately, in the US, we were about 10 years behind where they were in Europe when it came to security on credit cards. And a lot of that had to do with the credit card vendors. So you think about when you go and you check out somewhere, you'd swipe your card. That type of technology is easily replicated. So you've probably heard about card skimmers at gas station pumps and things of that nature. They put the little technology inside that card reader, and once you swipe it, because it's a magnetic strip, it automatically replicates it, and they have that information. So
how can you tell if you're at a gas pump or something, how can you tell if it?
That's a great question. So there actually is a way you can tell if something's fishy. So, and I'll talk a little bit about the cards today versus the skimmers. So if you're worried about the gas station you go to, you can go on to your Bluetooth, and Bluetooth technology, the way those skimmers work, they work off of Bluetooth technology. So they put them in there, and they usually have a reader somewhere within distance that can read the technology. So if you go into and you see other devices that look really strange, there potentially could be a skimmer on those. Now, it could also be somebody's phone that you're reading, like I can see some other devices, and most likely these are phones. That is a way you can see if somebody's using a skimmer in there.
Okay, so if you remember my mentioning earlier, technology is not my forte. So you're saying you just like can go and like look for Wi-Fi connections on your phone and see if it looks weird, if there's a weird one?
So what you do is you go to your Bluetooth setting.
Yeah.
So go onto your phone, click on your Bluetooth setting. You know, I can see a whole bunch of things here that I connect to all the time.
Right.
AirPods, some other things. But then it'll show up in your other devices. You can see how it's scrolling down here. And if you're at a gas pump, yeah, that's Brad's iPhone. If you see it scrolling down there and you're next to a gas pump and it has like all these different numbers and readers and things, there's the potential, and not always, but there is the potential you could have a skimmer. How you prevent that is the new cards. The new cards have chips in them. You can see the little chip inside the cards. Obviously, this is how they issue them all now. And they also have, this one's kind of hard to see, but it has a little radio signal. So these cards are really good. So the way the chip cards work, and they've had them in Europe much longer, is instead of you swiping it where your card information is stored on this magnetic strip, this chip sends out a one-time code to the card company. So when I tap it, so if you've got the little radio signal on there and you tap it, it's going to send a one-time signal to the credit card company to authorize that transaction. That code will never be used again. So even if a scammer got a hold of that one-time code, it wouldn't work again. It's kind of one of these constant changes. Same thing holds true. You can also insert it into the card reader, and it works the exact same way. Using the tap is the best way to do it at all possible.
Is that the same with like Apple Pay or the pay with your phone?
You can do those, that's correct. Apple Pay and Pay with your phone does the same thing. It sends a one-time technology. The problem you have with Apple Pay and those type of things, a lot of places don't take them. But you can add your credit card to your phone in most cases, and the same thing will happen. It's a one-time code. So in-person credit card fraud transactions have come down a lot since the chip technology happened. The biggest is card not present, and I'll talk a little bit about card not present.
I was going to ask about CNP, and so just having a chip though in itself is not the best. It has to have the chip and the little radio.
Chip's just fine.
Okay.
Yeah, and most of them all, I don't know of any credit card companies that aren't issuing the radio. The biggest issue you have with some of those are the readers themselves. For example, you were talking about allergies, I get allergy shots every couple weeks. My allergist, their chip reader is absolutely horrible. It never reads right.
Yeah.
And so I probably need to tell them, you need to get a new chip reader. But either the tap or the chip insert, it's going to do the exact same thing. The card not present is the biggest risk factor we see today. So a lot of times if you're going, first thing I would always recommend, if you're going to shop online, use a credit card, not a debit card. No, don't tell my bank, and this is off the record. Just kidding. We don't. The credit cards we offer at a bank our size is through a third party, through Texas, through the independent bankers. We make interchange fee off the debit cards. I never recommend ever using a debit card online because one, if it hits your account, it's hitting your bank account directly. The credit card gives you a little bit of a buffer in there that if you catch the transaction, you just get a new card issued and you're not having to recollect potentially lost funds. Card not present. So websites you're going to look for, and these are important things to look for. Look for websites that are going to ask you for your zip code and the 3-digit code on the back of your credit card. because that means they've got a higher level of security. If they're not asking you for those things, they're at higher risk. And so, let me kind of jump forward. This goes back to the credit card part. I recommend everyone look at your bank statements, look at your credit card transactions, get online, look at them every day, even if just for 30 seconds. Because fraudsters will do funny little things. Like, I know we had a card issue where it was like a $5 transaction to Walmart. We didn't do a $5 transaction to Walmart. It was their way of testing the system. And they do these small little transactions that you won't think about. And if you don't notice it, they then can go for a larger transaction. So I had a situation where a client utilized a credit card and they got hit with a pretty big credit card fee. Eventually they got it reversed and unwound, but it worked fine. So check your transactions daily, get alerts on your phone. The nice thing about with the technology today, you can go in and you can set parameters. I want to know every transaction over $50 and it will send you a text alert. And so that way you can know what's coming through on it. So utilize that. Questions on the credit card?
If you don't have an online account, are you better off? Safer?
I mean, like an online shopping?
Bank account.
I recommend everyone get online with their bank. Actually, it's safer to have it because that way you can see what transactions are coming through. If you're reliant on your bank statement, unfortunately, if you have fraud, you may not know for 30 days. If you're on there looking at it every day, you're gonna know pretty quickly whether or not you have a fraudulent transaction. So I recommend getting online. All banks are very secure and are monitored. You have less risk on being on your online banking than you do with doing online shopping. So I'd recommend if you're not on it, get online. And you can call your bank, you can go to the bank and they can help you set that up if you need to. Other questions on credit card fraud?
Well, Brad, before we go forward, can we talk a little
Sure.
bit more about like banking specifically? Because I think with other things too, like you were talking about, it's a hassle to have your phone to, verify who you are, or say you are,
That's a good
to
question.
do certain things. But the bank has had to take on a whole nother, or the banking industry, right? I mean, the training, I'm sure you have to give all of your staff, whether it's a teller in there or whether it's somebody else kind of behind the scenes to be looking for things, to be asked. And customers probably get upset sometimes because it is a pain.
It is.
It is such a pain, but then it's really all for our protection.
100%. And it's funny, I tell people, as I mentioned, I've been in banking 30 years, so obviously I didn't start out on the level I'm at today when I started in banking, but I look back at the loan officers and people I worked with at Texas National Bank and the amount of stuff that they had to deal with in 1994 versus what I have to deal with today is nowhere near the same. We do a lot more with less people now, and technology plays a factor. So it's a good question, and actually it's a beautiful segment into my next section, which is bank fraud. So you teed that up beautifully. Bank fraud, I'm gonna talk a little bit more about, I don't have anything in the package on here. I can just tell you what we're seeing from an industry perspective. The biggest risk factor in fraud we see today is check fraud. And unfortunately, it's not even close. We are having to do a lot more monitoring on check fraud than we've ever seen in the history of banking. And it's not just the local banks, it's the big banks, it's the mid-sized banks. Technology has played a big factor in that happening. So in the past, most checks come with what you call Neimer ink on it. It's a metallic ink that's in there. Well, now with the way we do deposits and stuff, a lot of times you can click a picture and you can upload it. So the Neimer ink doesn't really mean much anymore. But what's gotten really sophisticated is their ability to replicate checks. Most of these fraudsters can get check stock, they can get the Neimer ink, and they do a really good job at replicating. So I'll give you a textbook example of what happened to our bank last year. And we had a really on top of it teller that caught the situation. We had a man come in, he had a business check from one of our customers. It had correct account number, correct routing number. The check looked a little odd for what the customer normally would produce, and he was coming in to cash the check. It was a payroll check. Our teller caught it, took it back to the back, and they alerted the police. And he got the check back and he walked out, and within a few minutes, Belmead police showed up and arrested him. This ring was so sophisticated. This man had lived in Dallas, he was homeless. The fraudsters picked him up where they had had a stack of checks from banks all around Waco that they had replicated. They gave him the check, they parked a couple blocks over, and they would give him a cut of the money if he was able to get the check cashed.
Good
So
grief.
they weren't gonna get caught, but the homeless man was gonna get caught, which for somebody who has a child with mental health, man, that made me mad. I wanted to go find those guys and just like, how do you, number one, you're abusing the banks, you're abusing customers, and now you're abusing people with mental health issues.
Yeah.
So we've seen a lot of that. And where that transpires, and this is one thing I'll talk a little bit about bank fraud, is we've seen post office boxes get hit in the last couple of years. The one in Elmont got hit and stolen from, the one in Belmead got stolen from, and the one in Waco got hit. So what they do is they knock over the post office boxes, grab all the stuff that you have dropped in there on the outside units.
You're talking at the post office.
At the
the
post
one,
office.
oh my
Is that
They-
why they don't have post office
Correct.
boxes where you can
Correct.
drive through? I'm
If you go
always
to
like,
Elmont and
oh, we're
Belmead,
so lazy that they couldn't come out here and collect that.
no, because they got hit. And so what they did is they got hit and they stole all the mail out of there. Companies had dropped their mail into those boxes. The fraudsters got the checks, they stole it out of there, and they replicated the checks and then started cashing them around town and mailing checks. So it's the check fraud is the highest we have ever seen in my 30 years of banking.
That surprises me simply because there's so few people who write checks anymore.
Unfortunately, businesses still do a lot. And, you know, that's a conversation we have with a lot of our customers. I have preached check fraud to my clients for years, even when I went back to my days at Chase. And a lot of them won't change the way they do things until they get hit with fraud. And then their words are, well, I guess I should have listened to you. Yeah, I've seen this a little bit, you know. It's kind of like if I'm going to go to a home builder, I don't know how to build a home. I'm going to trust my home builder knows what he's doing, hopefully. But we've seen a lot of check fraud. So now we've put things in place. We encourage our business customers to no longer do checks, but pay their employees via direct deposit. We have a program that we call Positive Pay. So if they are issuing checks, they upload a file to the bank. It says, here are all the checks that we've written. And when those checks come through, it checks off. If there's a situation where, let's say they forgot to upload a file, they get a report that says, here the checks come through, and they can go through and say, yes, those are good checks. But I tell, you know, my big thing is, if you're writing checks and you're mailing them out to your credit card vendor, or you're mailing it out for your car payment, if you can, I'd recommend highly to get online with your bank and do bill pay. You can set yourself up with bill pay and pay those. Most of them get paid within 2 days if they're big vendors, you know. For example, I have a car payment for my wife for her Toyota. So I go in there, I set it up on my online bill pay, I put the bill pay in there, and in 2 days it's paid. There are some instances with those bill pays, if the person you're sending to doesn't have the capability to get it electronically, it'll send out a check, but it's not your check. It's the vendor's check. So you're not running the risk of that. And then if you do elect to write checks, that's perfectly okay. What I'd recommend is if you're gonna mail them out, go to the post office, go inside the post office and put it in the postal box on the inside of that. Do not put them into your post box at your house. People go around and they, like dumpster divers, they go through mailboxes and look for things. That's been a trick that's been going on for a long time. They'll, you know, get those credit card applications and they'll grab credit card applications out of there and try to do it in your name. So, you know, and when you identify something, the banks have become pretty experts at how to deal with it. You know, the minute you see the fraud, that's why I'm big on getting online and checking your bank account every day. When you see it, call your bank, go in, and the process can start pretty quickly. And if we can catch it fast enough, in most cases, you're gonna get your money back. But it's become more and more, the online systems are actually safer than doing other things in paper statements. So, questions
Well,
of bank fraud?
Kudos to the banks, because I know it's actually happened to myself and my husband. And even though I look regularly at our account, I have to admit I don't look every day. But I do look pretty regularly, but we have one account. And so sometimes it's the whole, did you go here? Did you know? But again, like you're saying, Brad, if they're doing small amounts, I don't even question that. And that has happened to us twice now and so kudos to the banks, because they're catching it before we ever did.
We have a lot more technology available to us now to look for odd transactions than we had in the past. Honestly, it's getting more, you know, we talk about for banks, it's getting more and more expensive. That's why you've seen a lot of consolidation of banks trying to handle all this stuff. It gets harder and harder because of the amount of technology you have to have in place. My wife, it drives her nuts at Christmas time because I check the credit card, and when weird things come out there, I'll say, did you do, don't ask. Those are her words. Do not ask. Okay, I trust you.
Yeah.
You know, so she gets a big kick out of me. She's like, I'm gonna buy some stuff today. Don't ask questions as to what it is. It's fine. Okay, I'll trust you.
So is a lot of the analyzing that's done, is that done by bank people, or is it software?
Software plays a big factor, particularly on the credit cards and the debit cards.
Yeah.
One thing that I didn't put in there, but I'll talk a little bit about is wire fraud, which probably is not going to have as big an effect on you, but just to give you an idea how fraudsters are working today. I'll give you two examples. One, I had a client who was buying a tractor. Good amount of money. He checked out the website. Everything seemed to look good. It all worked fine. So he got the instructions on where to send the wire. The company was out of Arizona. A couple days later, tractor, no conversation, nothing's happening. So he calls up, he said, I think I made a mistake. Well, the wire went through, it went to that company's bank account. Fortunately, Chase had a system in place that had flagged this particular company, and they caught the wire and they held it because they had some suspicions. Every bank has people who are reviewing accounts, so they had some suspicions. Fortunately, after about a month, and after a lot of help, our internal people working with Chase's internal people, we were able to get that wire back into his account. He was really, really grateful. And he said, I felt really stupid. And I said, don't. I mean, and I will tell you, it was $20,000. And he had the ability to do it, and he thought he was buying a farm tractor. And he said, I feel really dumb. And I said, no, I mean, everything you saw looked legitimate. You know, maybe don't buy a tractor online, but, you know,
I
but a
did
lot
that
of,
with a kayak.
what's that? You did that with a kayak?
Yeah, and it was the name, I knew enough about to know that that was a brand
Mm-hmm.
that was pretty well known. And I thought, well, they said they were having this great big closeout sale, and I thought, okay, you know, this sounds great. Looked, like you say, very legit. And, no kayak.
Yeah, my wife and son, they were gonna buy him one of those VR things, and unfortunately, after they did it, I was like, I don't think that was a good transaction. But, it was on sale, and you're right. I mean, you know, if you're gonna buy online, go through normal companies. If you're gonna buy online, go through Amazon, go through Apple, go through Walmart online. You know, if it sounds too good to be true, there's a pretty good chance it probably is. And you may get the product. Unfortunately, the product, what's the name? Have you ever seen Jingle? Have any of y'all ever seen Jingle All the Way with Sinbad? And, you know, one of the favorite part of my movies is he gets the toy and he opens it up and he's getting a legitimate deal, right? And as he opens it up, it all speaks Spanish.
Yeah.
You know, that's what happens when you go through some of those things. So wire fraud. So another instance that we're seeing too that we're having to work careful is this happened very recently. We had a client send an email to the bank saying, hey, I need to wire funds to this vendor. Our people went through all the proper processes, made a phone call. The client called back, said, yes, this is legitimate wire. I really am spending this amount of money. But what was not known was the vendor's email had been hacked. And it really legitimately was an invoice in the amount that it says it was. But the company that had their email hacked, the hackers changed the account number. And our customer didn't know that. And so when the wire went out, they get a call a few days later from their vendor saying, hey, we never got the money. I said, well, we sent it. Here's our email receipt of the wire that went out. They go, that's not our account number. So they are getting that sophisticated. So, verify second, if you have to wire money and you probably don't have to do it very often, call back and confirm. Don't take it from an email. That's what we do. We call and confirm all the time. And I know clients sometimes don't like it. Well, why are you having to confirm it? Because I don't want to take the responsibility if you mess this up. You're going to call me when you're mad. I'm going to make sure that you're legitimate. So wire fraud, they'll do things like hack emails of legitimate vendors, and they'll do things like just changing the account number just enough so that it does not go to its proper destination. Title companies that close real estate transactions are really having to fight that right now. They have all sorts of steps that there have been across the nation, real estate closings where the funds did not go to the proper destinations.
Oh, my word.
So they're having to do 2, 3, 4 levels of authentication. You think about it, you go to the airport now and the level of steps you have to go through the airport versus pre-2001. We've just gotten used to it. I learned this last trip coming back from Boston. Man, I really like TSA pre-check. That's a while. I have to take off my shoes, and that's the greatest thing in the world. But that's kind of what we're all getting used to, and it puts more on us to be onerous and vigilant on those things.
Well, this is a lot smaller scale, like what you're talking about is more sophisticated and like probably rings of people and all that, but does it happen often? So I have given my debit card information over the phone to pay for something rather than online. And sometimes, whether it's a recording or a real person, they'll ask if they can keep it on file, and I always say no.
I would recommend that you don't.
Yeah, I always say no. But I did have where an employee at it was appliance Campbell's Appliance, and I've used them forever. But somebody used the office guy used my debit card information because I paid for the service call with it over the phone to make another unauthorized withdrawal. Does that happen often, or is that real?
Not as often. Unfortunately, you're always going to have something like that. I know my wife and I were living in Dallas in the late 90s. We were living in Duncanville, and I went in, and this was using my debit card, and I'd gotten paid. And I went in, why is my balance that much lower? And the day before, we'd gone to a Lowe's, and we come to find out through the police reports that there was a cashier who was keeping numbers. She then was turning around and buying gift cards, giving them to friends, who then in turn would take the gift cards, buy stuff at the store, and then come back and return the items so that they could get the cash. It was that sophisticated. So unfortunately, you're always going to have the risk of internal fraud at places. Organizations are doing a better job of double checking and making sure that there are legitimate transactions going through. But unfortunately, where you have people, you always have risk. But most companies have gotten much better at making sure that they take that away and available from the employees. I'll talk a couple more things. One, advanced fee fraud, which I have to admit I had it taken off of here. I'm not gonna go through all that, but I took it off here because I was like, I don't know what advanced fee fraud is. And so I had to go look it up. And then once I looked it up, I went, oh, okay, so we do see this happen. And you talk a little bit about loneliness. And so you have people who come into, and they'll get contacts, they'll be with someone, they're building a relationship with them, whether it's online, and they'll say, hey, I've got money for you. I got available. If you will just wire me $5,000, I will send you $50,000. I can't tell you how many times in the banking industry we have told people, this is a fraud. You are not getting your money. You're not getting $100,000. But they play on their loneliness, they play on their ability to not be able to process that. That could be somebody with dementia, could somebody be with intellectual development disorders, that they just don't see it. So once again, that's one of those scenarios, if it sounds too good to be true, you know, I have not found my royal lineage from Nigeria yet. You know, I'm Welsh largely, so if I get a call that I know a royal prince in Nigeria, it's going to be fraudulent. So that's one that's out there. Sweepstakes scams, things of that nature, they're so prevalent. One of the worst things that I saw is they contacted my dad a couple years ago, and my nephew who's living with them right now. It was a phone call saying he's been arrested, he's in prison, he needs bail money. And unfortunately, my dad went to the bank, got cash, and then went to the city of Hewitt. And fortunately, the city of Hewitt told him, no, this is false. Do not send that cash out. So we see a lot of that, and it's all preying on that, and it's the emergency. If you don't have something now, I'm gonna be in prison, and I'm not gonna get out. So fraudulent charities are out there. Don't see that a whole lot, but there are ones that are always sending out flyers and stuff, and most of your charities are legitimate. If you have a question on it, you know, look it up, go to their online website, make some phone calls. You can sometimes go to Better Business Bureau to see if they're all legit organizations.
And our next class is about charities. How do you know if a charity is legit, and fundraising? So, good segue for this.
My big thing on charities is, you know, work with local charities. Work with ones that you're going to work with, whether that's your church, whether that's a local organization. Obviously, they're all national organizations like Red Cross and stuff. I mean, obviously, Red Cross is going to be a big thing right now with what has transpired in North Carolina and Tennessee. Organizations that you know of. If you're not comfortable with some of those, you can always go through United Way as well. And United Way works with a lot of different organizations, and you can actually pick which ones they'll go to. And then United Way audits those organizations. So.
Well, and one thing that D'Angela mentioned in our first class was, I guess people have gotten calls from the Waco PD saying they're collecting donations. Most nonprofits don't have the staff or volunteers to call and ask for donations. So if someone is soliciting a donation, it might be too good to be true. So that's another thing to keep in mind, because it's so easy to be like, oh yeah, I'll donate like that, but it doesn't happen often. Working at a nonprofit, we don't have time to do that.
No, and I've been on several boards of nonprofits, and I have time. The ones that always catch me, though, is now all these clothes and material stuff that are popping up all over the place, like Central Texas Marketplace. I have yet to figure out where some of that stuff's going to. So if I have things to give away, I go to Goodwill or Salvation Army, things of that
I have
nature.
a question on calls. I don't know if it's too paranoid, but they ask, the phone and say, who am I speaking with? I don't give them my first and last name, because that can be recorded and then used with financial institutions. Now they're using voice recognition. That it's like, I'm not telling you my name.
No,
Who am I speaking with?
they should be able to ask you, is this so-and-so I'm speaking with?
Right.
You know, and you actually, that is not overly paranoid. I'm pretty paranoid myself. So with AI the way it is today, we had a banking meeting with the Texas Bankers Association a while back, and they played a song that was a AI generated, I think it was Randy Travis song.
Yes.
You could not tell Then they played another AI song and was like, yeah, that is a terrible version of
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
But yes, they can record it and they can do stuff like that,
Yeah.
so.
And I figured, well, there's places that use voice recognition to authenticate. It's like, no, I'm not gonna say my name for you.
So what are companies that do use the voice recognition
They're
as
having to
part
make
of their?
changes. They're having to make a lot of changes on some of those things and go through multiple layer authentications. So they may have a voice recognition where it picks you up, but then it's gonna ask you additional questions to go further. There really is some really neat technology out there. It's a little bit on the creepy side, I will tell you this. That certain companies now are using a thing where it'll ask you, which car did you own in 1986?
Oh, I
Because
went
they're
through
getting it from
that, and I was going crazy.
It's a
because
little
I had-
creepy.
I had
Yeah.
frozen my credit
Mhm.
to where nobody could get in and use that. And then we put in a home security system. And that's what they wanted, is they wanted, and I was like going, the questions they asked me, I was like going, dear Lord, have mercy, that was 20 years ago. I'm doing good if I could tell you what I did last week. I don't know the day that I, bought this house. I mean, I can tell you the year, but the actual day,
Yeah.
no.
But they knew.
Well,
They
for
know,
public
and
records.
that's why I say, that's what's
Yes.
scary.
It's for
But
public
then,
records.
I was
That
like,
wasn't one of your security questions?
no,
No, they have, there are certain companies that have the technology available to them that pull from public records that can say, which of these 3 addresses did you live at in 1997?
Oh, wow.
And honestly, it's a super good technology because only you, and the couple questions they're gonna ask, you're the only person who's gonna know that, or somebody that's super close to you.
like I
You
say,
know.
I hadn't anybody run a credit check on me in,
Yeah.
20 years.
Yeah.
And so when they start coming up with those questions, I was going,
Yeah, the first couple times I had that, I went,
Yeah.
how do you know this? But then again, every time I get in my car on Sunday morning and I turn around and see you're headed to Highland Baptist Church, I'm like, I guess everyone knows where I'm at this point, so does it really matter?
Might as well go.
As a side joke, I always got to kick at these constant conspiracies and things of that nature. It's like, we know if you get vaccines now, they're inserting a chip. And I'm like, you're walking around with a phone that has that information. You're giving it out freely all the time. So we voluntarily give our information. And there's a lot more out there. I mean, I do Ancestry, and so there are public records from all over the place that go back that you can get information in newspapers.
What about apps? Everybody wants you to download their app.
Yeah.
Do you
They
download
should
it
be
and
secured.
They should?
Depends on what you're getting the app for. Like any type of thing, there's always an inherent risk with it, but most of the time the technology is pretty good at preventing it. Biggest risks we see today are just really people giving out their information to fraudsters. We had, unfortunately, being in Belmead, we get a lot of lower income and older, so we have had more than our share of situations. We had a poor man, it was a complete and total account takeover, and I think you'll see that in the package. They got a hold of all of his information because he had given it out. They took over his checking account, they took over his savings account, they took over his credit cards, they took over everything. And, that wasn't that he got hacked, it's because he gave stuff out that allowed him to do it.
Did he give it out to a stranger or a caregiver? Or a
I think
relative?
it was someone that convinced him that they knew him and he freely gave them information.
I've almost given things out on Facebook, like a picture of her first pet dog. And then I almost put the name in it, then I realized, no, one of the security questions I answered, what's the name of your first pet? And it's like, no, the world doesn't need to know that. Or picture your first car, it's like, oh, I said, oh, it's a Toyota. And, it's like, no, it's just too much information needless.
And that's where a lot of that you can, by just checking your accounts. The nice thing with credit cards today too, it's a good way you can check your credit. Most credit card companies have a score, will put your credit score on if you sign up for it. I highly recommend you do, Because if something happens and your credit score just really changes, you're gonna see it from that credit card statement, and that'll help you to be able to move quickly. You know?
We have gotten a bunch of things where it says we've been compromised, like where I used to work, or he used to work, from a credit union, from AT&T, sign up for this protection.
You know, most of that's garbage. If it's coming via email, it's typically gonna be garbage. If you have been truly compromised, we did have a situation in our bank where we had some clients compromised. There is a process and a procedure for it, and you have to send out letters and do all that stuff. So, yeah, I know one of the things I've seen on computers, like they'll say you gotta sign up for this antivirus. And once you click on it, it kind of takes over your computer, and you have to figure out how to get your undone. I had to do that with my parents' computer. I had to wipe it clean. I had to wipe it clean and start over. Fortunately, it was not, it was an ad that locked up their computer, but it hijacked it where it wanted you to buy that product. I mean, it was bad. Fortunately, I figured out how to circumvent it, set all the stuff back in, put all those things online. So if you're getting an email that you've been compromised, you're gonna get it from your bank, from AT&T, you're gonna get a letter in the mail.
But if you do get a letter from, say, AT&T, and you know it's legit, do you still sign up for that? I mean,
Most of them, it's free.
Yeah.
So like in those particular scenarios, if they're gonna offer you 6 months of free credit monitoring, it's not gonna hurt to sign up for it. You know, if you're vigilant about it anyway, it's not gonna make a huge difference, but then they have to pay for it. By law, they have to pay for it. So they offer you free service, I'd take it for a little while. It's not gonna hurt.
What if you get a letter that says, like, and I know several people who have gotten these same letters, so I'm thinking it must be real, but it's Change, that is a company that works with insurance companies, and has something to do.
Oh.
Change in conditions.
No, it was called Change.
I think so.
Yeah.
How do you find out if the letters are real?
Well, there was an instance and Change is a company that works with health insurance
Health
companies.
insurance,
Yep.
yeah.
And so they got massively compromised, and it caused, I had a couple clients that are in the medical industry, it caused some major problems for them because it all goes through a portal. And so when they were putting in to get reimbursement, so like when you go into your doctor's office, they'll do the billing and upload it. Some of them had to wait 3 months to get back because, and I don't think it was compromised, they had a system crash. And so what I would do in those situations, if you're worried about it, contact the provider that you may have gone through and see if there's anything to it. But with that particular scenario, there really shouldn't be any issues that you have with that. That was that's more of a situation where they may say your vendor, your healthcare provider may say, we never got paid.
Okay, it did call it a data breach, but I was just thinking about taking out the offer like you're talking about. for the
If they do the offer, you know, it's through their insurance company, so banks, those companies are all insured for data breaches, so the insurance kicks in and pays for that stuff, so it's not gonna hurt you to take it.
Okay, thank you.
Something else she said earlier made me think of things like Venmo and stuff like that. So, like, I do pay most of my bills online. Most businesses have, you know, where you can do that, but some of them maybe don't. I will use a bill pay with the bank. But I've always been reluctant to use things like Venmo and Zelle and Cash Apps and all that stuff.
Most of them are relatively safe as long as you don't give out the information. There are situations where people have given out their Venmo or been given out their passwords and things of that nature. I don't know, that's what my daughter uses all the time. She uses Venmo. Now as a banker, I'm supposed to say I hate Venmo. Venmo is the worst thing in the world because it's a payment platform that's stealing customers away from us. Small transactions, you're gonna link an account to it. It's gonna go through 2-3. Venmo, Zelle, things like that are relatively safe things. One thing I will tell you about those organizations, I've known businesses that have used it that you can only transfer so much money at one time. And I've told businesses, don't do that, because it is a technology company. If that company were to go belly up tomorrow, and with the technology industry, there is always that potential. That money that you've had sitting there, it's gone. There was actually a technology company, and I can't think of the name of it. It was an online sales platform like an Etsy. And people had sold their goods, they'd shipped them out, they were waiting for their money, and the website and the company went under. And so people had tens of thousands of dollars that they didn't get collected. I mean, it's a legitimate website, it wasn't compromised, the company just went out of business. So, small transactions with Venmo, Cash App, all gonna be fine. You know, we have a group of friends, we go on Baylor game trips together sometime. One of us will pay for the ticket, so we'll Venmo or Zelle, $50, $100. You're not too much for us.
And like the little squares, everybody uses paying those are fun.
Square is just another payment method for credit card taking. I'll leave you with a couple things. The most thing I can tell you is, I can't preach this enough. Review your accounts regularly and daily. Review your, if there are things you can sign up for those, sign up for them. It is worth your while. Read emails carefully. There are a lot of junk and scam emails out there. If it's asking you to click on something, don't click on it. I can't tell you how much I tell you that.
It's okay to open an email, but just don't click on the attachment.
And if like I know, for example, I have clients that I've asked for something or something, and they've got something from a portal for me. Yes, I'm gonna open it because I know legitimately it's coming through. Be careful who you trust. If you have computers at home, update your virus software regularly. Update the software on your phones on a regular basis. Most of those have they have software that's updating glitches that are maybe out there. So the more you update your software every time it comes through, have Norton, McAfee on your computer, make sure it's running, do a scan of your computer on a regular basis, just to make sure that no one's getting onto it. People like the IRS are not gonna make a phone call to you to tell you that you're running. Ask questions if you have loved ones. This is one thing I've preached to both my parents and my in-laws. If someone calls you saying that I'm in jail, ask questions that I would only know. And I'll leave you with this. So I have a wonderful client I've worked with for 24 years. They travel quite a bit. They're in the aircraft business. With the debit cards at American Bank, we still have it set up where if you're going to travel, you have to send us travel notifications. We don't have the level of sophistication that the big credit card companies do. So inevitably, they will call me because they have traveled to Tanzania or they've gone to South Africa. Now, I know I'm on Facebook with them and I know legitimately they are that. Now, I can't really take instructions from them over a text message, and I won't. So they know the process now every time they do it. I'm going to ask you questions that only the two of us would know, and I'm sorry that I'm going to ask it, but you put yourself in this position because you traveled without telling me first. And so they always said, all right, tell us what questions you're going to ask. So, I've had questions of where was the first office that you have and what bank was I working for? So some of these are fraudsters not going to know where we first started working together. So have questions like that available, for luck, that you ask them if that situation arises. If it's your son, what was the first bike you had, or things that only they may know. You talked about being paranoid. Be suspicious. Be suspicious. Because there are unfortunately a lot of people out there who are trying to steal money, and it's a big, big industry.
I had a real person fraud, a con man, and that's when I learned what the con man gains your confidence. About 2 in the morning, doorbell rings, and some guy saying, I got locked out of my car, and the neighbor down there, and they're very convincing, he was clean cut, well dressed. Hey, can I just have $20 of gas money? And that long story, and the dog's going haywire, barking in the back. I figured probably his bad guy buddy was in the backyard. And no, hey, you know, you look like a nice enough guy, give him 20, just drop it in the mailbox tomorrow, and then, well, later I was told, no, you're never gonna get the 20. But I learned a lot of lessons from that. Well, first of all, about a year later, there was an older gentleman who wouldn't give this probably same time man money, and he was shot.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, in Waco. So I learned, look, if anyone rings the doorbell at all, especially after in dark, I'm not even gonna say hello.
Yeah.
Now they know that I'm home and they can get angry with me for not cooperating.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm not gonna say I have a gun, because now they know that if they rob my house, they can go after a gun. It's like, I'm just gonna remain quiet and probably call the police. But they, you know, we're good-natured people, we wanna help, especially if they look clean cut and well-dressed and show, yeah, that was the con.
I had the police actually come down on my door, and this was about 5 years ago. Woodway Police, we didn't call the police. And so I kind of opened up and lo and behold, it actually was the Woodway Police. So my next door neighbor across the street, he passed away a few years ago. He had pressed the button, you know, and his wife was standing outside with the light on. They walked over to our house. You want to talk about a heart attack at 4 o'clock in the morning? You know, I'm thinking to my son, because as I mentioned, my son autism and had some very difficult behaviors. Like, oh dear Lord, did he just run out of the house? You know?
That's why we have a security system.
But and the poor lady across the street was like, she's waving, going, over here. No, please.
Another question. Is it worth it to subscribe to a dark web monitoring service? Norton's has one.
Yeah, it doesn't hurt. I mean, like, I have a Discover card, and Chase credit card both have it too.
Oh, yeah?
And
So
so, and you
something
can
that you
sign
have
up
to
for it.
subscribe to,
It
or,
doesn't cost you anything.
oh, it
Just,
doesn't?
you just sign up for it and do it.
What can you do if you are on the dark web?
Just pay attention to your accounts. There's not a whole lot. I got a thing from Discover the other day. Your social may have been found out on the dark web. And I'm like, okay. I just pay attention. You know, I pay attention to my credit report. I pay attention to the transactions. I mean,
So you said the Chase cards?
I think the Chase card does too. I know the Discover card does. Most of the credit card programs have some of that dark web monitoring.
When my husband was working, things got screwed around, and I opened our account one day, and it said $5.3 million. And I went,
Whoa.
whoa!
So
And I called him and I
I've heard of these things happening.
said, yeah, something's happened. We have $5.3 million in our account. And he went back up and he went to the county and he had to sign off on stuff because of the business. But they had gotten that screwed up with his personal account.
Goodness.
But, you know, it gave me a heart attack because I
Oh, I'm
thought,
sure.
oh, if something happens, how do we prove that we did not transfer that money
Yeah.
into our personal account?
There's been some companies that have inadvertently sent payroll files twice.
Oh.
And, you know, in a lot of cases, you can sometimes get that ACH or the direct deposit back. But in a lot of cases, once it's gone, it's gone. Especially with wires. That's why I'm so paranoid of wires. Wires, once they go out, that money's gone. Your odds of getting that money back are slim to none. With a direct deposit ACH, there's a chance you can get it back. But, you know, I've seen those happen. Employees said, cha-ching.
Well,
And the company didn't figure it out for 2-3 weeks, and then they said, hey, you need to send us the money back. And they're like, I don't have the money
It's
anymore.
gone.
It's gone.
Yeah.
I thought, you didn't find it odd that you got paid twice in the same day?
I just thought you were being nice.